There are many accounts of demonic possession in history, many of which either end in the violent death of the individual or a church exorcism, the forceful eviction of the demon back to the underworld. Interestingly, the age-old ritual of exorcism has made a huge comeback in the 20th century, and the 60s and 70s saw a 50% rise in the number of exorcisms performed. But is it all media hype? Are there evil beings that can force themselves into a human and take control of their body? Or is the whole idea of demonic possession simply a myth, kept alive by hoaxes and overreactive imaginations? So let's count down 5 cases of demonic possession. In 1971, the Piron family moved into their new home in Rhode Island, a sweeping farmhouse built in the 18th century. It was to be the start of a new life for the Pirons and their 5 young daughters, and it was, but not in the way they expected. Caroline, the mother, awoke to the ghost of an old woman hung by the neck from her bedroom ceiling. Over the next few weeks, strange sounds started coming from the basement of the house. Doors would open themselves and slam shut, and food would sweat blood. With the help of paranormal investigators, the family discovered that a witch practicing in the 18th century had supposedly sacrificed her own child to Satan, opening the house to the devil, and then hung herself. The family came to believe that the witch was haunting the house, as well as other demons. There was also other suicides on the property. One of the daughters, Andrea, now in her 50s, still maintains that the story is completely true. She states there was a time she was truly terrified in the house, saying she thought she saw her mum die. She spoke in a voice we'd never heard before, and a power not from this world threw her 20 feet into another room. The family stayed in the house for 9 more years, and just sort of learned to live with the spirits. Dubbed the Yaton Demoniac by the British press, George Luckins claimed to be possessed by 7 demons that could only be removed by 7 priests. His exorcism became one of the most infamous accounts of the 18th century. Luckins' condition was first noticed when a woman named Sarah sent a letter to a local priest, begging him to take a look at her childhood friend. For the past 18 years, the letter said, Luckins had slowly deteriorated both mentally and physically, often breaking down into seizures and growling at people around him. As the years went on, the fits got worse and took on a supernatural tone. He declares in a roaring voice that he is the devil. On June 13, 1778, 7 priests were rounded up and began a lengthy exorcism at the Temple Church in Bristol, England. As the priests opened the exorcism by singing hymns, George Luckins fell into a violent fit, barking and hissing at the men before shouting that his torment of George Luckins would be 1,000 times worse for trying such a stupid thing as an exorcism. Following that outburst, Luckins cycled through 7 demonic personalities, at the end of which he yelled he was the devil himself. In the end, according to the account, the demons were sent back to hell. Annalise's story has been the basis of many fictional movies. There was a case of possession and eventual exorcism so extreme that it left an entire country at odds with the topic of religious fanaticism or demonic possession. The girl behind the story was Annalise Michel, who had a history of epilepsy and mental illness, which over the course of her life worsened. In 1973, when she was 15 years old, Annalise became suicidal and began displaying some strange behaviour. She began to hear voices, she feared religious artifacts and even drank her own urine. None of her previous treatments were working against her worsening condition, and she began asking for priests to help her with what she considered a case of possession. Although her parents were against this, a couple of local priests began performing exorcisms on her, a total of 70 over the course of her life. None of these seemed to be working, and to make matters worse, her parents held back her medication, withholding her from receiving medical treatment. Her story ended tragically, with Annalise eventually dying from starvation and neglect. Her family and the priests were charged with homicide. Annalise's story is fascinating. Many people state there is 2 popular misunderstandings concerning Annalise, the first being the false belief that Annalise was mentally ill and not possessed. The second being the lack of understanding that Annalise was a victim soul for the church and the conversion of sinners. Many people that knew Annalise well and spent time with her were certain that she was in fact possessed. It's often been reported how she was able to carry on very intelligent conversations, even about her own condition until the end. Anna Eklund was a girl from Iowa who had been raised as a devout Catholic. It was said, however, that her father and aunt were practitioners of witchcraft and had cursed the girl. By the time she was 14 years old, she began displaying signs of demonic possession, including fear of religious artifacts and not being able to enter a church. Her first exorcism, which took place in 1912, was said to have cured her, but shortly after she became possessed again by multiple entities, many of whom claimed to be the same spirits who had also possessed Annalise and Michelle. After many failed attempts to exorcise the spirits over the years, Anna was placed in a convent in the hopes of curing her condition. Anna continued to display signs of possession, such as speaking in tongue and strange voices. Some of the more intense paranormal phenomena that occurred during this 23-day-long exorcism were some of the following. Anna exhibited inhuman strength, and required sometimes up to 6 nuns to hold her down. Anna levitated completely off the ground on more than one occasion. She would leap from her bed in the lying down position, onto the wall above the door, where she held on and maintained her position of crouching, apparently defying gravity. While Anna was unconscious, voices would talk, and verbally assault everyone that was present. Her head physically elongated and swelled at certain times. Her body also expanded to the point of severe bloating. After various exorcisms, Anna was finally cured and able to leave the convent at age 30, after 16 years of possession. Ronald Doe was the inspiration behind the famous movie The Exorcist, the story of the horrific demonic possession of a 14-year-old boy. The events were said to have begun sometime in the 1940s, when the boy's aunt bought the boy a Ouija board and encouraged him to use it. After her death, Ronald was said to have attempted to contact her by using this, which is what set off the series of strange events. The family heard the sound of marching feet, furniture moving on its own, ordinary objects levitating, and scratches appearing on the boy's body. Blessed objects would smash to the ground on their own accord, and religious pictures vibrated on the wall. The scratches would often include words being carved into his flesh without any real suspects to blame. Ronald's parents had their boy examined by medical and psychiatric professionals. A pastor arranged for the boy to spend the night with him for observation. That night, vibrating sounds were heard coming from Roland's bed, and scratching sounds coming from the walls. Satisfied by his observations, he began the exorcism of Ronald Doe without hesitation. The ritual was unsuccessful. The case was then referred to a Roman Catholic priest who attempted to exorcise the demon. This time the boy tore a bed spring from his mattress and inflicted a punishing wound upon the pastor. The cut required stitches and the exorcism was put on hold. Ronald went home with his family. While there, family members observed the words St. Louis appear across Ronald's chest in blood. They immediately took the train to St. Louis and wound up in the hands of William Bowden. Over a period of 2 months, Bowden performed the exorcism 30 times, with Walter Halloran assisting and acting as witness. Good ultimately triumphed over evil. The demonic forces relinquished control over the boy. So that's 5 terrifying demonic possessions. I would love to know what your opinions are about these cases. If you are not religious, please don't mock the opinions of people who do believe.